Are you failing because you're just not working hard enough? You're just not working long enough hours? You're not using enough willpower? And maybe you just don't want it hard enough, right? If you really wanted it, wouldn't you sacrifice more? Does this sound familiar? This is a familiar tale of basically the hustle culture, right? There's a whole crop of people who seem to always be telling you to work harder, try harder, suffer more, and that's the key to success. Well, in this video, I will convince you of the opposite. Now, right away, let me address the skepticism. You're probably thinking, well, of course, succeeding takes hard work, right? Of course, if I want to achieve my goals, if I want to do extraordinary things, obviously that involves hard work. So what the hell am I talking about? There's a subtle problem that basically everyone in the hustle culture circle misses, and it's the good old problem of causation and correlation. So this is something that as human beings, we're generally just pretty bad at, right? We are pretty bad at telling the difference between correlation, which is two things happening together, and causation, which is one thing causing another thing to happen. There's a website full of great examples of these spurious correlations, of things that go up and down together, but clearly don't cause each other. What most people don't realize is that hard work and success are one of those spurious correlations. Yes, there is correlation, but it's not a causal relationship. So let's break that down. Yes, if you look at someone's story of how they succeeded, how they gained financial freedom, how they achieved their goals, and so on and so forth, that story almost always involves hard work. But here is where it's correlation and not causation. It is not the fact that it's hard, it is not the fact that you are suffering that causes the success you experience. And you know this is true when you think about you cannot just increase your suffering in order to increase your success. And similarly, when your success rises after a certain point, your suffering doesn't rise with it. So for example, from my own story, again, it took me a long time. It took me a lot of hard work to get to the point where I made any money as an entrepreneur, right? So going from zero to any income was a lot of work, was really hard to do. Later on, after I'd established a business and I started building teams and so on, the success of the business, so the revenue, the money the business generates, kept going up over time. But just because we doubled our revenue from one year to the next didn't mean that suddenly I had doubled the amount of hard work I was doing or doubled the amount of suffering I was doing. In fact, it can be quite the opposite. Like once you've done all the work to build the thing and you start handing it off, you can see the success keep climbing and you can start relaxing. This is really important to understand because I know that it's practically blasphemy to make this statement in our culture because like the hustle culture, this idea of a hard work leads to success and so on is just so ingrained in everyone that it's almost like slaughtering a sacred cow to say, look, no, this is not what's happening. And if you're doubting this, if you're listening to this thinking that Shane must be wrong about something, again, just think about this. You cannot increase your success by increasing your suffering. It is not the hardness of the work that causes the success. And this is where hustle culture and all the messaging in hustle culture just falls flat on its face. Because, number one, you can have someone who's, yes, they're lazy, they're procrastinating all the time, they're just not doing the thing, and that's why they're failing. But just working hard is not going to solve that problem. They could be working hard on all the wrong stuff, and then, okay, they're no longer lazy, but they're still suffering. And equally, you could have someone who's already working super hard. They're already working very hard and very inefficiently on all the wrong things, and they're failing. And then doing more work and working harder is not going to solve that problem. And I'm going to take this even further because indeed, working less can make you more effective at reaching your goals. To explain this, let's think about athletes. Think about top athletes in the world, the people who are going to the Olympics and doing the most incredible physical feats. How much does a top athlete train every day? This depends on the sport, of course, but in many sports you'll find that top athletes will train something around 3 to 4 hours a day. So for example, the fastest sprinters in the world will typically have about a 3-hour-a-day training regimen. Now, that leaves a lot of non-training time, doesn't it? So if you wanted to be the world's fastest sprinter, why don't you just train more? Why don't you just go and train 8 hours a day? In fact, you know what? Let's follow the hustle culture playbook and just say, you know what? If you really want it, then do more. And you don't need sleep, right? Who needs sleep? Successful people don't sleep. So what if you slept, let's say, 4 hours a day? and you trained the other 20 hours of the day. In fact, if you want to be the world's best sprinter and all these other lazy slobs are only training like 3 or 4 hours a day, why don't you sleep 4 hours a day and then spend 20 hours just sprinting full out at top speed? That's it. You just sprint full speed for 20 hours a day, you sleep 4 hours, and then you do it again. Wouldn't you easily beat everyone else? So yeah, of course, this is a ridiculous example, right? Because you can't sprint full out for an hour, let alone 20 hours. And when we think about athletes, it suddenly becomes clear, well, of course, you're going to have training, you're going to have intense training, then you're going to have a lot of rest and recovery. If anything, they need to sleep more than most people in order to be able to fully recover and do another 3 or 4 hour training block the next day. And now, just to avoid an argument in the comments, of course, there are sports where people indeed train longer. And you might find, for example, Olympic lifters, they might actually be hanging out in the gym for like 12 hours a day. But even there, what you'll find is that what they spend most of their time doing is resting. Most of their time, they're not having the weight on their back. They're not doing the intense exercise. And so even when you have really long training days, a lot of that training day is doing very low intensity work, recovering, resting, massages, sauna, etc. Because we know to get the absolute top performance out of an athlete, it requires all this non-intense training stuff. It requires all this rest and recovery and prehab and rehab and so on and so forth. And we know that that's how you get peak performance. It is not just by doing more of the hardest thing possible. Well, as it turns out, it is exactly the same for any kind of creative work or knowledge work. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're a creator, or you're a knowledge worker, then the exact same principles apply. Which is to say that, if you're working like at a conveyor belt in a factory, then this same principle doesn't apply. But for any kind of creative work or knowledge work, this 100% applies. Just like you can't sprint all out for 8 hours or 10 hours a day, you can't do high intensity, creative, important work for 8 or 10 hours a day. And in fact, trying to do so will just make your performance worse. So what hustle culture essentially suggests is, hey, if it's not working, just do more. That's actually making you worse. If you just go, okay, I'm just going to spend even more hours and I'm going to sleep even less and I'm going to give myself less recovery, well, that's just going to make you worse. So then you're trying even harder, you're suffering more, you're still not succeeding, and then the solution is to suffer even harder. Well, this is going nowhere. If you want to be a high achiever and you want to be incredibly productive and incredibly good at reaching your goals, you need to start treating yourself like an athlete. You need to realize that the way you're going to make the most progress towards your goals involves setting yourself up for having a window of time from anything from like 3 hours to 5 hours a day where you do your best, most important work. And then there's going to be a lot of supportive stuff. So you might have a few hours of like busy work, answering emails and stuff like that you also do. But then also, very importantly, you have to have elements in your day that support those intense 3 to 5 hours of work. If you want to be a high achiever and you want to become incredibly productive, you have to start treating yourself like an athlete. And you need to start setting yourself up for having that period of intense work, which I'm going to call 4 hours. Of course, there's variability here, but 4 hours is a good window to aim for. You can say, I'm going to do 4 hours of intense, focused, creative work every day. And that's going to move me towards my goals in more significant ways than the work most people do all week. And then next to those 4 hours of intense work, you might have another 1 or 2 hours or so of kind of busy work, of stuff that isn't creative work, like answering emails, taking care of some administrative stuff, whatever. That also needs to get done. But then in addition, you also need to have elements in your day that support that deeply focused work for 4 hours. And this is really good news, because what elements support that? Well, it's all kinds of things that make your life better, right? If you get enough sleep, you get enough rest and relaxation, you exercise, maybe you meditate, you pursue some hobby that's not work related, you socialize. All of these things are going to give you the recovery and put you back into that place of strength and relaxation from which you can do your intense 4 hours the next day. And I mean this literally. There are people who are struggling away who could literally get more done and make much faster progress towards their goals by working less and by doing more of the things they enjoy and by concentrating the important work into a 4 hour window every day. So what is the practical takeaway for today's video? Well, the first and most important thing is this change of perspective. It's like you have to unsubscribe to the hustle culture idea of just work harder to achieve your results and really start thinking about what does athletic performance look like in what I do and what I want to achieve. That's a video I recorded a while ago to explain how my approach to productivity is different from most productivity systems and especially different from what most people try to do when they're trying to get more work done and be more productive. Ironically, for most people, what you really need to do is work fewer hours, be less stressed, apply less pressure, but do the right things in the hours that you work, and that will get you to your goal much quicker. Now, this isn't a theoretical thing for me. I have turned this approach to productivity into a system and into an online class where you can learn it. And that online class is called Focus and Action. In this class, you learn the entire productivity system that I have used to do things like build Thrive themes and run that business as well as other businesses at the same time, while also traveling and living as a digital nomad. And hundreds of students who have already gone through the Focus and Action system can attest to the fact that this really works. But in Focus and Action, you don't just get to copy the productivity system that I use for myself, we'll also coach you through it. And it includes work with myself and other coaches on the Icario team, and it includes weekly accountability. So we will help you clearly define your goals and break them down into subtasks, and we will check in with you every single week to make sure that you stay on track. Also, once a week, you hop on a live call with myself and the other Focus and Action students, and you can ask any questions and talk about any obstacles that have come up so that we can make sure that on the way through the system, on the way to your goal, we help clear out all obstacles that come up. So if you're fed up with struggling away by yourself, and this year you finally want to reach your goals, and you want my help to do it, check out the link in the description and see if there are still spots available for Focus and Action. Note, this is only available for a very limited time, and this video right here will also disappear very soon. So go check out Focus and Action, sign up, and I'll see you in class.